My in-laws sat in the front row of my wedding and whispered loud enough for me to hear, "Is this really all they could afford?" 2 years later, I handed them an invitation to our housewarming party. When they pulled up the driveway and saw the house, my father-in-law's coffee cup slipped right out of his hand. This is that story. My name is Sophie. I grew up in a small town in Georgia. My parents were hard-working people. My dad ran a small hardware store, my mom was a school librarian. We were not wealthy, but our home was full of love, good food, and people who kept their word. I met my husband Ryan at college. He came from a different world. His family had money, not generational wealth exactly, but comfortable. Private schools, annual vacations in Europe, a last name that opened certain doors in their city. Ryan was nothing like his parents. He was humble, driven, and genuinely didn't care about the things they cared about. That's what I loved about him. His parents, Robert and Patricia, were a different story entirely. From the moment Ryan brought me home for the first time, I felt it. The polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes. The questions that weren't really questions. "So your father owns a hardware store, how charming." Or "a librarian, how sweet." Such an underappreciated profession. I smiled through all of it. Ryan squeezed my hand under the table. We both pretended not to notice. Ryan and I got engaged after 3 years together. We planned our wedding carefully on our own budget without help from either family. We chose a small venue, a beautiful old barn outside the city that held 80 people. String lights, wildflowers, homemade cake from my aunt. It was exactly what we wanted. Robert and Patricia arrived 40 minutes late. They sat in the front row in their expensive clothes and looked around the barn with expressions I will never forget. Patricia leaned to Robert and said loud enough, "Well, it's very rustic." Robert replied, "At least it's short. My maid of honor heard it, my mother heard it. I heard it standing at the back waiting to walk down the aisle. I walked down anyway." I smiled the whole way. I married Ryan in front of 80 people who loved us and 2 who didn't know how yet. At the reception, Robert pulled Ryan aside and offered to throw us a proper celebration later, implying our wedding wasn't one. Ryan said no thank you. Patricia told me my dress was lovely for a barn wedding. I said thank you and refilled her champagne glass. Robert and Patricia did not know. What almost nobody knew was that Ryan and I had spent the 3 years before our wedding building something together. Ryan was a software engineer. I had a background in finance. Together we had been quietly investing index funds, a small rental property, one calculated risk on a tech startup that Ryan's college friend was running. We lived modestly on purpose. Small apartment, second-hand furniture, packed lunches. Every extra dollar went into our investment account. The startup went public 14 months after our wedding. Our stake was worth just over $1.8 million. We didn't tell anyone immediately, not our friends. Not our parents, not Robert and Patricia. We bought a house first. 5 bedrooms, 3 acres, a proper kitchen and a driveway long enough that you couldn't see the house from the road. Then Ryan sat down and wrote 2 invitations to our housewarming party. One for each set of parents. Same card, same date, same address. He handed his parents' invitation to me. I sealed it myself. Housewarming was on a Saturday in October. My parents arrived first. My dad walked through the front door and stopped in the hallway. He looked at the ceilings, the staircase, the light coming through the tall windows. Then he turned to me and his eyes were wet. He said, "Sophie, you did this." I hugged him for a long time. Robert and Patricia arrived 45 minutes later. I watched from the upstairs window as their car turned into the driveway. I watched Patricia lean forward in the passenger seat as the house came into view. I watched Robert slow the car to almost a stop. They sat in the driveway for almost 2 full minutes before getting out. Ryan greeted them at the door. Patricia's first words were, "Ryan, whose house is this?" Ryan said, "Ours, Mom. Sophie and mine. Come in, I'll show you around." Came downstairs as Robert was standing in our living room turning slowly in a circle, taking it all in. Patricia was holding her handbag very tightly. Robert looked at me and said, "How?" I smiled and said, "We've been working toward this since before the wedding." "Would you like some coffee? I made it myself. It's very rustic." Ryan coughed to cover his laugh. Patricia sat down without being invited to. Things with Robert and Patricia changed after that day, not immediately and not completely. People like that don't transform overnight, but the comments stopped. The polite dismissals stopped. Patricia began calling me by my name instead of Ryan's wife. Robert asked me once, genuinely, not condescendingly, how we had managed our investments so well. I told him we just decided early on what mattered to us, and we protected it quietly. He nodded like he understood. I think he did. Ryan and I have been in our home for 3 years now. My parents visit every month. My dad has a favorite chair in the living room that is now unofficially his. At last Christmas, Patricia pulled me aside in the kitchen. She said, "Sophie, I want to apologize for the wedding, for what I said. I didn't see you clearly then." I handed her a dish towel and said, "Help me dry these and we'll call it even." She laughed, an actual real laugh, First time I'd heard it, some people just need time to see what was always there. My in-laws laughed at my small wedding. They saw a barn and wildflowers and assumed they understood my ceiling. They didn't know my ceiling was somewhere they hadn't looked yet. The most satisfying revenge is never loud. It doesn't announce itself, it just arrives. On a Saturday in October, at the end of a long driveway, in a house that was always going to exist, because two people believed in each other quietly, for years before anyone else could see it,